What I learned from Caesar's De Bello Gallico. De Bello Gallico, or Caesar's Gallic Wars, is a text he wrote while in the process of conquering Gaul, what is now France, north of the Roman Empire, in the 10 years preceding his crossing the Rubicon and then defeating Pompey at Pharsalus, and then establishing himself dictator for life of the Roman people, establishing what later became the Roman Empire. Number one, what I learned is that Julius Caesar is an absolute badass. Julius Caesar fought from the front when it was necessary. He had great bravery, but he also was a strategic mastermind in order to do whatever was necessary as a general to put his troops in the best position to win. Whether it was responding to a secret ambush hundreds of miles away where he would do forced marches to get his troops and rescue the legions there, or to come to a certain at the Battle of Alesia, the part of the wall was breached and he put on his red cloak. The red cloak was signature that he was the general, and fought with his cavalry in the front lines to help the breach and save his troops at the last moment. So Caesar did whatever was necessary to win, whether it was staying back in the back to make the right strategic decisions or fighting the front to motivate his men. He was an absolute badass that did whatever was necessary to win at all costs. What I also learned from De Bello Gallico is that life is hard and you can never trust anyone fully. So Caesar had certain chiefs, like the Aedui, Diviciacus of the Aedui, who were the Roman allies in Gaul. He had certain allies, but they would often backstab him at different points throughout the war. He gained and lost several allies throughout the Gallic Wars. At certain points, the Caesar would be 100 or 300 miles away in a certain part of France, and he would be busy fighting and conquering some tribe, and then another tribe would rise up in revolt that he thought was allies, so that he had to go back and conquer them and get hostages to make sure they wouldn't revolt, or then he would have to cross over into Britain. Britain had certain parts of the country that were in rebellion, so never trust your faith in anyone. You can only trust yourself, and even his Roman lieutenants, the ones he trusted the most, like Cotta. Cotta was stuck in winter quarters, and then all of a sudden the Gauls put together a trap where they tricked the Romans into coming out of their fortifications to promise them grain supplies and rewards and helping feed the starving Roman soldiers stuck in their winter quarters. But once they left the fortifications, the Gauls turned tail, betrayed them, and ambushed, and then basically murdered an entire legion in two cohorts. So always be prepared for the worst. Caesar was always alert when a certain cloud of dust was rising in 5 or 10 miles away. He noticed it, or his sentries noticed it, and then he immediately marched out. Turns out the cohort he sent out to forage grain was under ambush from Britain tribesmen, so he had to go fight them off. Always be alert and be ready for any circumstances. So another thing I learned is whoever is the most prepared wins. The Romans weren't necessarily bigger and stronger than the northern European barbarians, such as the Gauls, the Germans, and the Britons, but they were more prepared. Every single time the Romans set up camp, could be anywhere in the world, whether they were back home in Italy or 300 miles north into France, or well north of that into Germania, they always set up camp. They set up trenches around their camp. They set up wooden palisades, fortifications, spikes in the ground. They knew how to outmaneuver the enemy so that when the enemy attacked, the enemy might be bigger, stronger, more numerous, but the Romans were more prepared with their fortifications, their siege weaponry, their defensive palisades in order to outfight and outlast. Now, Caesar described in the war with the Helvetii. Helvetii were a Gallic tribe living in Switzerland that migrated from the Alps through a valley into the eastern part of France, when the Helvetians, who were big, strong men accustomed to fighting the northern Germanic tribes, they charged the Romans in tight phalanx. But Caesar's Roman legions were up on a hill, so they had the high ground. The Romans threw javelins at the Helvetii, so that the javelins either pierced the soldier and killed him on the spot, or if the Helvetii held their shields up to take the javelins, then the making of the javelin was barbed so that it would go through the shield and then hook inside of it, and so it would stay inside, hooked inside the shield, and the soldier, the barbarian, had to hold his shield up with the javelin perpendicular, waving up and down to weigh him down, and to make him very tired after a few hours, and he'd have to give up the fight because he couldn't hold up his shield anymore. So the Romans were more prepared. And another thing I learned was that whoever has the superior technology and higher discipline amongst its ranks will always win. Like I already mentioned, the Romans built fortifications. The Romans had javelins, they had ballistas, they had a tight maniple formation. So actually, after the Marian reforms, they didn't fight in maniple formation, they fought in cohorts, and they stayed disciplined, and they had better technology. They were more intelligent. The Gauls, not that the Gauls were unintelligent, but they didn't write anything down. They fought bare chested and painted. They didn't fight in disciplined close ranks. They kind of just swarmed the enemy and tried to get through with brute strength. But the Romans held together in tight formation, and when the Romans tired out, they would retreat inside their cohort and replace it with men that were fresh and full of energy, so that they could outlast the enemy in the fight. When Caesar was battling in Alesia, the final battle of the Gallic Wars against the mighty Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix, Caesar had besieged Vercingetorix in the town of Alesia, but a relief army of 200,000 Gauls had been rised up and collected and drafted by an escaped slave Vercingetorix had sent out, so that when the army of 200,000 arrived and surrounded Julius Caesar, they could have easily surrounded and slaughtered Caesar's army. Instead, Caesar built fortifications. He chopped down the trees around the surrounding area, built walls dozens of feet high on both sides, one inner wall surrounding the city, and then the Roman camp would be in the middle, and then one outer wall, and in the middle he built trenches and moats and spikes inside the ground, spikes inside the trenches, such that when the Gauls attacked and swarmed the wall, they would be held back by all the different traps and spikes in the ground and moats, and then the Romans from their towers could shoot missiles down and hold back a vastly superior force. Now, Caesar didn't have that much time to build the fortifications around Alesia, maybe a month or so before he was trapped, but his men worked hard. The legionaries didn't just march 30 miles a day. At the end of the day, they would build vast fortifications to defend themselves and really out-prepare and do what's necessary to win in war. in any situation, could be within the walls of Rome or thousands of miles away. Another thing I learned from De Bello Gallico is that taking big risks pays off. Caesar crossed the Rubicon. He knew that once he crossed the Rubicon, he would be an enemy of the Senate and possibly condemned to die. But Caesar knew that without taking big risks, right, fortune favors the bold. Without taking big risks, then you're just going to get outplayed by whoever has bigger numerical superiority, or whoever has more allies, or whoever can surround you and wait until you starve out. So Caesar, there's a great part of De Bello Gallico where a German chieftain has been helping the Gallic tribes in the north, and Caesar has to go cross the Rhine into Germania and fight off the chieftain. But Caesar's men, the Roman legionaries of the various legions, are frightened out of their wits. They've heard stories about how the Germanic tribes are big, burly men that will, in the dark woods, that will come out and ambush you and fight you and easily win because of their superior warlike spirit and toughness. But Caesar knew Caesar had he was an inspirational speaker. He knew how to make a great speech, so he made a speech before his military tribunes. The tribunes were the senior officers of the legions, and he said, "If you all go back home, you're free to go. I won't stop you, but I am just going to stay here with the 10th Legion. The 10th Legion was Caesar's favorite legion, and all I need is the 10th Legion to fight off these big burly Germans, and my men will still win." Caesar's 10th Legion plays out various times throughout the De Bello Gallico as his go-to, almost his personal bodyguard, like a Praetorian guard that he goes to as an elite shock unit to win in any situation. So he makes an inspirational speech and rouses up his men to go cross the Rhine. He builds a bridge in the matter of days. It's supposedly very impossible to cross the Rhine, but he builds a bridge in a very short time, crosses the Rhine, defeats the Germanic tribes in battle, and scares them to never help the Gauls again, and then crosses back and goes and continues the rest of the Gallic Wars. So I'll end the video with talking about why reading Caesar's Gallic Wars pays off. And one thing I'd say is nobody else is doing it. Nobody else is reading De Bello Gallico. Now, I know that there are high school courses that are offering Caesar's De Bello Gallico as required reading, but there are other Latin texts that you can read that are more complicated, more flowery language, more poetically elegant to read. Like Caesar's very terse, simple, matter-of-fact style of how he systematically marched this way and marched that way, fought this tribe, and then conquered this city, then foraged for grain. It's very terse and simple, almost like the Hemingway of the Latin language. But nobody else is really reading De Bello Gallico. There's certain Latin classes that offer it as assigned reading, but not everybody takes Latin in high school. Or there's certain Latin texts that are even more entertaining to read. But the reason why you should read it is that Caesar is one of the most successful men in history. He defeated his rivals in the Senate. He defeated Pompey. He became the dictator for life that established the Roman Empire. His nephew Augustus carried it on. But also, Caesar was a very smart guy that knew how to establish long-term goals, so that if you're ever starting a business or starting something new, taking on a long-term project that will take a long time, even multiple years, this 10-year journey of how he started conquering this tribe, then this tribe, then this tribe, is a great way to learn about organization, tactics, work ethic, how to delegate tasks, how to spin warfare. I think Napoleon, one of the greatest generals in history, was also greatly inspired from reading De Bello Gallico. Caesar had a relentless work ethic. He was constantly alert at all times. Within that 10-year stretch of conquering Gaul, he never took any breaks. There was always something going wrong, whether a tribe revolted hundreds of miles away, he had to go march and defeat it, or one of his cohorts was being ambushed, and he saw from the safety of his camp a cloud of dust rising in the distance. He had to go march out and save his troops. He was constantly on the alert and always putting out fires, and that's how anybody should approach long-term planning, is to not take too many breaks. And then that's pretty much it. I mean, it's definitely worthwhile to read. It's not the most flowery, elegant Latin language, but it's a great, terse, simple way to get into the Latin language. Or you could read it in English, and I'd recommend, if you are interested, to leave some comments about any value or self-improvement that you get reading De Bello Gallico. And yeah, that's thank you for watching my explanation of De Bello Gallico, and thank you for watching this video. Until next time.